In life, it is quite regular to hear the expression, things are not always quite what they seem. And outside of normal everyday situations, this phrase applies quite well to certain types of pseudo-hidden phone masts. So we all know and have seen phone masts that are on like lattice towers or are blindingly obviously sort of situated on buildings. However, there are very many types of masts that try to hide themselves in various ways from the eyes of the public, not necessarily to deceive the public of their presence, but generally to try and help planning applications so they fit in more architecturally with their sort of street and sort of environmental scene that they are going to be placed in. I'm going to organise these masts in terms of sort of how well hidden they are, from the sort of worst hidden, not really hidden at all the way up to expertly sort of hidden, and even someone who's specifically looking out for masts would probably struggle to realise that there is actually a phone mast there. So right at the bottom is the Lattice Tower. Now, these don't even try to hide themselves most of the time. Big metal structures, generally silver in colour, grey, sometimes even sort of a white colour depending on when they were last painted. But they're generally fairly obvious, especially as they tend to be on hills. So next up from that, I think, is just the standard Streetworks Monopole. Now, these can look like anything from like air pollution meters in effect, because they're sort of white shrouds and just generally white design. Although they do sometimes colour the shrouds, they fit in with trees, but they are sort of poles, they are quite wide, and they tend to have lots of cabinets on the bottom, so even if you're not all too keen in looking out for them, they are generally reasonably easily noticeable. However, there is a class of Streetworks Monopole which is slightly harder to recognise, which are the sort of replica telegraph poles. Now, these are coloured and designed to look like telegraph poles, and telegraph poles are actually ubiquitous, certainly in the UK. So unless you're actually specifically looking out for these replica telegraph poles, they are actually quite hard to see. And I say this as someone who drove past one every day for about 4 or 5 years without even noticing it was there. And I had an interest in, say, masts and stuff at the time, so frankly, if I thought it was a phone mast, I would most definitely have noticed it and photographed it. So they can be quite good. The general way of telling those, they have cabinets at the bottom, although they can be hidden by trees, and also these sort of footholds on these replica telegraph poles they only have 3 or 4 of them near the top, not sort of loads of them covering most of the sort of top 2/3 or the top third section of the pole. And obviously this is because you don't want metal or anything around the RF part of the shroud or mast, really. They're also not made of wood, obviously, they're made of like GRP, so if you're up close you can tell that's not a telegraph pole. And also some of them have got microwave links attached to the foot things, which do sort of give away that they're not actually a telegraph pole. But nonetheless, can be quite well hidden. At a fairly similar level to the Streetworks Monopoles, there are sort of hidden, or rather coloured, panels on buildings. So this is where they stick normal solar panels on, say, a building chimney, but they colour the panel the same colour. So these tend to blend in so well because they are the same colour as the feature they're mounted in front of, so the eyes and they just kind of blend into the background kind of thing. However, they don't tend to necessarily colour the feeders that well, so if there's lots of cables coming out of it, which kind of potentially gives them away a little bit, but nonetheless quite well hidden. And then above that we have the sort of more thought out methods of hiding, in inverted commas, the masts. So quite common in the urban kind of environment is the fake chimney. So this is where they stick panels in, or it's not necessarily actually even chimneys, but they stick panels in, say, a fake roof structure, and the roof structure is specifically designed to blend into the local environment. So in this case, on top of a theatre, there is almost like, it's not a shed really, it looks a bit like a shed, but it's just a cuboidal building, or a cuboidal unit on the roof, which actually houses 3 triple band panels now. And once again, you would never ever know that there was actually a mast in there, because there are actually even ways to hide the microwave links behind certain materials, so it just looks like a completely normal building with normal features and everything. So they are quite skillful, and in terms of building body modifications, they don't end there either, because there are a whole lot of other replica building features that you get to replace, that you can use to hide antennas. So there are fake flagpoles, fake sort of ventilation ducts, there are all sorts of replica things. So in this case, this is an O2 site, and there are 2 sort of replica white, almost tubes sticking out of the roof, and those at the top section at least, they house the antennas within the shroud, and they are just bog standard masts. Now the giveaway for these is again quite hard to tell. If you look up close, they do have sort of potential jointing point and some screws where the sort of shroud meets the base pole, but again, it doesn't shout out at you. And actually, the other clue is cabinets, but in some cases these can also be sort of hidden in, say again, a fake kind of roof compartment or something along the lines of that. So these can actually be really quite hard to tell. Comedically a little bit though, like in this case, there are bog standard solar panels almost right next to it for another operator, which kind of gives the game away that there is at least one site there. But that, like I said, it doesn't actually stop there. So these are relatively small tube-like things, although they also use fake flagpoles. So these look like flagpoles that you'd sort of rig a flag on, but instead they have a whole array of panels in it. So in this case, this is actually a dual stack flagpole, which has 2 sort of layers of 3 panels in each layer. Fairly standard Vodafone O2 setup, but it's hidden inside a flagpole. And again, you wouldn't necessarily really notice this unless you look very up close, and then it kind of looks like the flagpole's got quite a lot of separate joints in it. And if you look to the bottom of the flagpole, it's clear that there's an awful lot of cables going into it. There are 12 feeders. Also on this building was a massively smaller, thinner sort of flagpole, which carries the 3NEE feeds. But just like the building previously displayed, it also has bog standard panels around the side as well. So not sure what's going on there, and in case you're wondering, the old panels are dual band orange ones for 1800 and 2100, which have long since been ceased broadcasting, allegedly because the slimline flagpole carries the modern 3NEE signal. Now these fake flagpoles are not just used on some normal brick buildings, but I've also come across them used on a lighthouse as well. So in this case there are 2 of them, which are orange PCS 1800 MHz 2G ones. As you can see, there's 2 of them on the building, but if you're walking past you would not really notice them. The only way you can really tell is the top section almost looks kind of wrong, and it's kind of thinner than the sort of base supporting pole, but it's really not that noticeable. And actually below these fake flagpoles there are a pair of sort of disguised panels as well, sort of mounted on the railings. However, at the absolute top of the sort of ingenuity and hiding scale in some ways are the fake tree masts. Yep, they've found ways to hide masts in trees. Now these come in a whole variety of different shapes and sizes. So they're ones that look like fake tree stumps. And because they're used on motorways, you really wouldn't notice when you're quickly driving past at 60 or 70 that this sort of weird tree looking thing is in fact a phone mast. There are also these sort of trees that look a bit like kind of almost, I guess, palm trees in some ways, that also carry masts. But the panels don't tend to be mounted inside the actual sort of trees of these, but the panels tend to be mounted sort of on the sides, hidden within the fake branches, which is kind of amusing. But they definitely win in terms of ingenuity, and especially if you have one of these fake trees sort of surrounded or sort of within sort of a forest, you really would have a lot of trouble seeing them, especially if some of them seem to be quite a long distance away from, say, roads, because of course these being tall sort of palm trees, the panels are high up, so they can be a reasonable distance from their, say, target area and still have a good line of sight. So they really can be quite hard to tell. In one case I came across one which was right next to a lattice tower, and it's kind of like, why bother? But presumably the fake tree came first, and then perhaps once the locals got used to the idea that my phone mast there wasn't too much of a bad idea, then came in the lattice tower when they just decided that they really didn't want to do a tree again. Partly because also these trees do look a little bit off when up close. So in this example it was sort of up on a hill, pretty visible to like roads and some houses. So frankly, an obscure looking tree probably wasn't that much less of a distraction than a lattice tower, really. So I hope you've enjoyed this whistle-stop tour of the various approaches and ingenuity that the operators use in order to hide their equipment almost in plain sight. So if you're interested in this sort of stuff, don't forget to check out my playlist on solar and phone masts, and also my website pedroc.co.uk, both of which are linked in the description below. See you in the next video, I guess.